What we get from these scriptures, the knowledge that we get is twice removed from the truth. That is because Sanskrit is not spoken. I would actually blame the so-called Sanskrit scholars. Sanskrit is perhaps the easiest language to learn.
Hello and welcome to the NEP Debate. India has got its new education policy after 3 decades, and the nation has been debating ever since it has come out. One of the topics that is being discussed a lot is the introduction and the revival of Sanskrit as part of the mainstream education system. Today we have with us Dr Himanshu Rai. He's the director of IIM Indore, and he's also a recognized and celebrated Sanskrit scholar. Welcome, sir, to our program.
Thank you very much, Prajanma.
To start off, I would like to know, your opinions on the NEP stand on Sanskrit. You're a Sanskrit scholar. What do you think about what the NEP says about revival of the language and integration of the language into various other fields, from astronomy to yoga to linguistics? It's going to infuse Sanskrit into every part of the curriculum. What do you think about that?
Prajanma, I think it's a wonderful idea. It's an idea whose time has come for multiple reasons. So if you look at the interest that people have so far as the scriptures are concerned, most of our scriptures in the Indian civilization and our culture are in Sanskrit, or at least a lot of them we have in Sanskrit. And the Sanskrit scriptures, if you're talking about the Vedas, if you're talking about the Upanishads, if you're talking about the philosophy, which is the Shad Darshan, etc., all of them are in Sanskrit. And what has happened in the last few years, and by last few years, let me talk about, let's say, last 50, 60 years, is that what we get from these scriptures, the knowledge that we get is twice removed from the truth, because it gets translated into some other language, then it is translated into English, and by the time it comes to us, it is more of an interpretation of the writer or the translator rather than the actual knowledge. So I think it's a very good idea, because of this reason. And the second reason is that, a lot of people say that why Sanskrit? Why not all the languages? So of course, the NEP does not say that the other languages are not going to be promoted. The only thing is that there is a focus on Sanskrit, and that's for a very good reason. That is because Sanskrit is not spoken as much as it ought to be. Now, for a language to survive, it needs to be spoken, no matter how many scriptures you might have, no matter how many books you might have. But if there are people, if you don't have people who are speaking that particular language, the language eventually dies. And therefore, we need to revive the language so that we have more people who speak in Sanskrit. And the richness of the literature which is available in Sanskrit is mind-boggling. So when you spoke about me being an ardent scholar of Sanskrit, I'm an ardent student of Sanskrit as well. So the amount of knowledge that I have gained, even in the areas of management, for example, my entire PhD on negotiation, I drew many, many lessons from the Mahabharata. My work on spirituality, I have drawn lessons from the Yajurved, Gita, and the Ishopanishad. And likewise, there is a plethora of literature which is available out there, which just needs to be brought into the mainstream. And I think, therefore, this is a very, very apt step.
Like you said, it's not spoken much. And even if it's brought into the mainstream, do you think people will start speaking a language that has been almost dead for centuries now?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, Prajanma. And I would actually blame the so-called Sanskrit scholars for the position that we find ourselves in, for the simple reason that for some strange reason. I mean, I ask you, how did you learn any language that whatever you speak? I mean, how did you learn English? How did you learn Bengali? How did you learn Hindi? You learned it by speaking. You were asked to speak first. You always speak a language first, and only then do you move to grammar. That is the natural progression of things. First comes the language, and only then somebody tries and puts a grammatical structure around that. It's the same with Sanskrit. So first, people should be urged to speak in Sanskrit. They should be encouraged to speak in Sanskrit, and only then go to the grammar part. Unfortunately, the way Sanskrit has been taught, even in our country, has been exactly the opposite. So first we were made to ratify, to mug up the roots, the roots, etc., etc. And by the time you came up to some of the tougher parts, you almost gave it up because you said this is the most difficult language. Au contraire, Sanskrit is perhaps the easiest language to learn for the simple reason that it's a very scientifically organized language. You can make your own words. The etymology of Sanskrit, once you start understanding the dhatu, etc., is very, very, very simple. The only problem is, as I said, that people should be first taught to speak English. The problem is now, even if we try and speak in Sanskrit, Sanskrit. So now, even if we try and speak Sanskrit, the first thing that a Vyakaranacharya or a teacher would do is he would point a finger and say, hey, there, you erred so far as the grammar is concerned. And that discourages people. Right. If you stop discouraging people, if you teach them the language as it is supposed to be taught, which is by teaching them to speak first, it's going to be very easy. And I'm telling you, Sanskrit is even easier than Hindi. Because, for example, in Hindi, let's say, just to give you an example, I want you to indulge me for a while. To give you an example, if you have a very simple sentence in Hindi, vah ghar jata hai. Now, there is only one way in which it can be spoken in Hindi. Vah ghar jata hai. You can't say ghar vah jata hai, ghar jata hai, vah. It has to be vah ghar jata hai. But in Sanskrit, you can speak it in 3 different ways. Saha griham gacchati, gacchati saha griham, griham gacchati saha. So, and all of these 3 are absolutely correct ways of speaking this particular thing. And thus, I believe that understanding and speaking Sanskrit is very, very easy, provided the pedagogy is right.
One of the major hiccups or problems that this policy of revival of Sanskrit might face is that we do not have many teachers teaching Sanskrit at this point. The number of teachers we have teaching engineering or medical or any other subject for that matter, we have a minuscule amount of them teaching Sanskrit. How do you see this policy working, or do you think we should go with teaching the teachers first? What is the first step forward?
So I think there are 2 aspects to it. When you say that we do not have enough teachers, possibly you're talking about the organized education. So if I talk about organized education, for example, schools and colleges, then we don't have teachers anywhere. As in, there is a severe paucity of teachers. I mean, if I look at IIMs, we have a severe paucity of teachers. So the number of faculty that we need, we are not able to get them. Likewise, it is so far as engineering is concerned, which you mentioned, or any other college or school. But here, the idea that I have in my mind, and I think that is the idea that the NEP is also trying to bring in, to revive the language, it doesn't have to be necessarily limited to teaching in schools and colleges. We can actually have centers which offer courses in this particular, for example, Alliance Française. Now, Alliance Française is an establishment which actually promotes the French language. And through their the Alliance Française Center, they can actually provide teachers. Likewise, we have many such organizations who can provide you with Sanskrit teachers, provided you don't start looking at the qualifications. Does this person have a B.Ed? Does this person have a PhD? So on and so forth. As I said, the focus should be to start making people speak in Sanskrit. Once you have achieved that, then you can start focusing on the formal education part, where you can bring in all of those rules and regulations. And therefore, simultaneously, while you engage these people to teach spoken Sanskrit, you should also engage in good PhD programs and good training the teachers programs to teach subsequently Sanskrit in an organized setup, such as a school or a college.
The NEP also talks about how the government wants B.Ed colleges to teach Sanskrit. Do you see that happening on time?
Absolutely. You see, the only issue that I would kind of raise a red flag on is that what I do not see is the plan document. I mean, the vision document is fantastic so far as NEP 2020 is concerned. Once I get my hands on the plan document as to how this vision is going to be implemented, then possibly I would be able to comment on it. But if you're asking me whether it's possible, I think it is possible.
Subramaniam Swamy, in one of his interviews, had recently said that we should work towards a point where Hindi and Sanskrit almost become one, become undistinguishable. Do you think that is something which is achievable?
See, I'm not too sure in what context Mr. Swami said that, but to me, these are two very different languages. So when you're speaking about Hindi, Hindi itself has so many dialects, and I seriously don't see as to how they can be brought together, and I seriously don't even see the need to do so. So, for example, when you speak about Hindi, what are we really talking about? Hindi could be Khari Boli, Hindi could be Hindustani, which is what normally people speak. And then there are several dialects. For example, in my father's village, what is spoken is Bhojpuri. Now, it is a takeoff of Hindi, but it is a language by itself. And likewise, if you go to Western UP, there is a very different Hindi which is spoken. If you go to Bihar, there's a very different Hindi which is spoken. So to say that we are going to assimilate all of this, I'm not too sure if that's a great idea. If you're saying that let's try and assimilate the Vyakran, the grammar of it, that is already done. And therefore, I do not see as to why we should be even looking at it. We should try and keep as many languages which are there alive and not let them die.
Right. You spoke about how Sanskrit is very easy to learn actually, and it gives you so many options to say the same thing in 3 or 4 different ways. How easy or tough is it for a kid who does not know Hindi or is not from the northern part of India, is from the southern states, knows Tamil, Telugu, or southern languages? How easy or hard is it for him or her to grasp?
As easy as anything. As easy as anything. The only question, as I said, is does the kid have enough people around to speak that language in? The reason why we learn our mother tongue very, very quickly, and by mother tongue I mean the language which is spoken at home, very, very quickly, is because that is what people around you are speaking in. And therefore, simply by listening and repeating, you get to understand the language. I don't know if any kid is really taught the mother tongue in a very structured way. All of that happens subsequently when you go to the school, if at all it happens. So for example, even if you take a test of Hindi grammar in a place like UP, which essentially has Hindi as its subject, I'm sure several people are going to fail. But can they not speak the language? Of course they speak the language. Are they not good at grammar? They're not good at grammar. So those are two very, very different things. So when it comes to speaking, I think Sanskrit is one of the easiest languages to speak. And subsequently, it is also one of the easiest languages to pronounce, because unlike English, where you can have different pronunciations of the same spelling, in Sanskrit is pronounced exactly the way it is spoken, and it is spoken exactly the way it is written. And not just that, for each and every Vyanjan or Swar, there is a particular place allocated to it. So you can't make any mistake. So for example, if it says, Akuhu Visarjaniya Kanthya, it means all the kavar, ka, kha, ga, gha, ang have to be spoken from the throat. Or when it says, Ichu Yashas Talavya, all the chavarks, cha, cha, ja, ja, ya, your tongue should touch the talu. And therefore these positions are fixed. And because these positions are fixed, it makes it that much more easier for you to speak that language and to pronounce it absolutely correct.
So given 2 options, one is that Sanskrit be made the major language of communication, we speak it, and that way we revive the language, or a lot of people get into the scholarly aspect of it. A lot of people study it. Like Israel revived Hebrew, which was almost a dead language, by making it the major communication language. Which would you prefer?
See, it has to be made a communication language. But please understand, I'm not saying it should be made the communication language. I'm saying it should be made a communication language.
One of them.
One of them. One of them. We don't have to be jingoistic about Sanskrit, or for that matter, any particular language. What we need to understand is that the opposition to any imposition comes in only when the doubts, etc., are not clarified. So, for example, in certain quarters, it is being said that why are we getting fixated on certain languages? Why are we trying to push certain languages? I don't think that should be the intention, and I don't think that should be the spirit in which it should be taken. So I've said it in interviews before that a child of 4 can actually think in, speak in, and understand 4 languages at the same time, at least 4 languages. Do we do it? The answer is no. And therefore, I think through the NEP, subsequently, whenever we are implementing, what we should say is that one of the languages ought to be something that we as a country have decided to revive, because we have a rich literature which is available and we don't want to lose out on the literature. And the only way you can save literature eventually is if the language is alive, and the language can be alive only if people are speaking it. And therefore, what I would suggest is not just 3 languages, let's have 4, 5 languages, but let's make them optional. At the same time, those languages which are dead, which means they are not being spoken, those we need to pay special attention to revive them. And Sanskrit could be a great beginning, because Sanskrit reflects a lot of what our civilization and culture stood for.
The NEP does talk about English being taught as a communication skill, but do you think if we stress too much on Sanskrit or introduction of other languages, we'll lose out on English? Because like it or not, English is the global language, and you have to know it to be to participate in a global scenario. Do you think a model like China, where they teach business communication in English, is a good one to go with, or just a communicative English course will do?
I'm not too sure as to where this debate has even originated from, because the NEP, at least in my reading, is not talking about an either or thing. It hasn't said that let's replace English with a certain set of languages and let's be done with English, so on and so forth. And as you rightly said, whether we like it or not, it's not even a question of whether we like it or not. It's there. It's as simple as that. It's there. Most of our higher education courses are in English. The world does its business in English, and the world will continue to do its business in English. So let's be very, very clear about what is our objective over here. Our objective is to place India in a position of prominence in every field, be it business, be it culture, be it arts, be it anything, be it the decision making, and to see as to what kind of a world do we subsequently want to live in, and therefore shaping the world itself. If we wish to play a major role in shaping the world, we can't shy away from the other world languages. So therefore, the question of trying to replace or saying that either this or that simply does not arise. I'm sure there are people on the fringes on every side and in every place who would want to make this an issue, but I don't see this as an issue. I mean, you and I are conversing in English. This happens to be a medium which possibly reaches out to a very large population of the world, and we would want to do that. So when we talk about that we want our knowledge to be actually propagated in the world does not know Hindi, the world does not know Sanskrit, the world does not know Tamil. So therefore, we will have to use a language which is universally acknowledged. And therefore, while we focus on English as we have so far, and while we continue to do so, we have to bring other languages also and tell the world that here is a rich literature, rich amount of literature available in India in multiple languages. Why don't we partake of this as well? So it'll never be an either or thing. And the second part of your question, should it be limited to business communication? No, not at all. It is a language of communication. So we should focus on English as a language of communication as we continue to.
The NEP as well was written in English and Hindi so that it reaches out to a lot of people. And I think that brings us to the end of the discussion. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Do feel free to like, share, and subscribe. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.